Welcome to the Wheel of Bliss podcast. The goal of this season is to go deeper into Jason's understanding by applying my models so that we'll be able to spend the next season covering Jason's model of everything. The format is for Jason to share the Buddhist perspective and then for me to connect it with what happens with the mind and brain so that we see how and why Jason was able to come up with the model of everything. Today, we're going to cover arguing. So, Jason, do you want to give the Buddhist perspective on arguing or debate?
Sure. Thanks, John. So first of all, like this, I've found arguing, especially in debate, is like a very, taboo word in our culture. People just, like I tell people like, oh, you don't have to argue. Like, I'm not arguing. I'm like, it's okay to argue, but like, so it's a.
Well, one of the things I do is I say to people the definition of arguing is to make a case basically in order to convince somebody of a different position. So if you don't argue, then you never try to convince anybody of your position, right? And then everybody always goes, okay, yeah, I argue. But that's where a lawyer makes an argument. You make a case or a series of statements, hopefully causal, which we'll talk about, in order to get someone to agree or change their perspective or change their behavior. But you're right. If people hear the word arguing, they go, I don't want to argue. Well, let's get back to the definition. But like, we can call it debate. We can call it civil discourse, whatever.
We can call it collective learning. How about that?
I love that.
I love, but what you just said, John, that was brilliant. I love what you just said. I gotta definitely remember that. Those definitions are great, and asking them the question. So yeah. Think of it as collective learning. That's really what we think of in the Buddhist perspective. It's never like a presidential debate where I represent this group of people, you represent this group of people, and like the fate of the world. The most important position in the world is at stake here. Everything. No, the idea is like, we're gonna collectively work together to come to truth. And in Buddhism, truth always means it's going to help you alleviate suffering, improve your life. And you'll when you debate, it's really helpful to take a position you don't even agree with, just to practice the skill. So that's why I would say there's like three purposes of the debate in Buddhism. So one of them is like I said, we're trying to brainstorm. We're trying to solve a problem. So you say a solution, I try to poke a hole in it. And that's only going to help us get to the stronger position. But again, it's become a thing where people, almost identify with their views. So people take it very personal, which is kind of the second purpose of debate, is to not be attached to your ideas, because it really frees you up and you get to become really sharp. I've said before that the debating is the faculty of debate, which we call like bodhi, like bodhisattva, is like a sword. It's like a flaming sword. So you're literally sharpening it through debate. And this is really what the scientific method is. This is how you do the science. So we're all like, this idea that I'm a scientist, I'm an artist, I'm a lawyer. It's like everybody's a scientist. It's really just a faculty of your mind. And you could say it's getting rid of bullshit. So when you have this faculty and you use it properly, when you have this sword, you're not going to be taken advantage of. And that's true. You're buying a car. You're going to ask the questions. You're going to, you're not going to
going to your doctor. You're going to your doctor.
Exactly.
And trying to get a diagnosis.
Right.
Exactly. It's the same thing. Everybody thinks I'm going to hang back and he's going to do all of it. Well, if you have information and you can help fix his thought process, it actually improves your diagnosis.
Absolutely. That's great. Yeah. And so yeah, like scientific. I had another thought, but yeah, just from a Buddhist perspective, the biggest bullshitter is yourself. Like that's the concept when we talk about emptiness. And someone commented on our last episode about I thought the Buddhists have no concept of a self. You're talking about a mind soul. And to clarify, when you get deep into the teachings, it's not that there's no mind, there's not that there's no cognitive process of which I know is me, but all the stories of a self. That's what we're trying to get to. And the crazy thing is, it's almost like, there's a saying by like a 9th century master, like, um, you know, the greatest enemy that you have, who's causing you all of your problems, is who you cherish and protect like a best friend. And that friend is just what is it called? Like a house of cards. It's just this story upon story upon story upon story upon story. And so really the purpose of debate is to sharpen that sword, to turn it into this web, clearing the cobwebs of these stories of your inauthentic self. And again, that's why you and I are such a great team, because the Buddhist perspective and your understanding of the unconscious, it's just like, yeah. So that's
Well, and let me say something about that, because
yeah.
I think that's right where I was going to go too, is we do argue, we do debate. In season 1, we did. Most people didn't even recognize it because, again, I think we're both looking for the truth.
Mhm.
Everything you just said, I think we both do that. I think we both are high self-esteem. So if you're low self-esteem, you're looking to feel better about yourself at someone else's expense. So then you don't really look at yourself, you don't challenge yourself, and you wed yourself to the idea. I am the idea. You're not.
Mhm.
And so I think that's it. You obviously got this great training. I think you were very good at arguing and you're very smart, but you got this great Buddhist training. I think where I picked this up is my dad used to argue with his best friend. We'd see him every Labor Day, Memorial Day. And my dad and his best friend would sit out under the stars by the Colorado River. There's no civilization around, basically. And they would pick a topic and they'd argue it for 10, 15 minutes, and then they'd switch sides. So everything you just said about you're going to learn
Mhm.
more arguing something you don't necessarily believe is absolutely accurate. So I really think all three of the things you mentioned are things you and I do naturally without thinking. And I think that's why we can help other people do this, because we already do this naturally, habitually.
Exactly. Like you could almost say, yeah, that like the scientific method is inherent in the brain. It's really just there, and unfortunately our school system has retarded it, literally. So that's a whole nother story. But the good news is, you can train it. It's
Yep.
completely trainable, and it's one of those things where it will help you in every aspect. Like I said, when you're
And that's why I'm a big proponent of arguing, because
me too.
ultimately this will help your self-esteem.
Mm.
If you want self-esteem, you should learn how to argue and sharpen your mind, not surround yourself with people who artificially tell you you're great and you're not then. So yeah, I completely agree.
Because
This is why I'm so passionate about this, because it
me
affects
too.
everything. It
That's why I'm
affects
telling you,
everything.
John. This is what we need to create. But the thing is also, how many times you talk to people, I hear it all the time. They're like, I just don't know who to believe. Like, especially when it comes to the health world,
Right.
So that shows that they like how. So just to give a clue to answer those people, you don't believe anything. What you do is, whenever you hear anything, like this is instinctive for us. Once you've trained this faculty, is to question. Like you
Right.
never hear something and say, "Oh, I trust this." I hate when people tell me that. Like I'll say something and I'm like, "You should read this." No, I trust you. I'm like, I don't want you to trust me. I want you to see for yourself. So that brings me to something that's really important to understand and debate. Again, this is a like the Greeks were doing this. Like this is an ancient tradition, and I really think to have a civilized society, we need public debate. We need public
Yeah.
discourse, and this is what was done. This is what kept India very peaceful for a long time. It kept Tibet very peaceful. Is that there was this public debate, this free, like arena of ideas, and it's exciting. Like there is like, I love video games, and they do test my dexterity, but nothing is exhilarating as a good debate.
Right.
So and everything that goes into the debate, because you do your own research, and this is a really important concept. So in the Buddha's time, there is all these different people like the Buddha, like claiming to have found, true happiness and freedom. And they all accepted different numbers of knowledges, different ways of knowing. So some people almost everyone would agree, even the what's called like the hedonists at the time, who believed the only thing that's true is what you could see with the five senses. They're kind of like the nihilists of today, right? Even everyone agrees that direct perception is reliable. Like if you taste something, you tasted it. You could know from that. But then other groups of people would say that, the Holy Scriptures, the Vedas, can be taken at face value. And then another way is inference. And so the Buddha accepted direct perception and inference. So inference is where the whole Buddhist path is. You need the direct perception because we have to have a foundation. Like we see the color red, like it's the inference debating world is based on direct perception. It's grounded in it. But so for example, when people say like, well, how do you know it's true? Well, it's really simple. Like you and I are having a conversation. Someone is with us. They hear what we're talking about. They pass it on to someone. That person mishears some of it and passes it on. And then the last person, in the telephone game says it's different, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you could say that that's not true. And, you can trace back to what happened, what was said, or the color of, the cup, whatever it is. So it starts off like just learning how to form a logical statement. That's really what it comes down to is like, and we do like you said, we do it all the time. People make statements without realizing they're making a statement. Like this is good for you, or just like people giving advice all the time. They don't realize that they're making a syllogism. They're making a statement of a fact.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you ask them, well, why do you believe that? Or why do you think that statement is true? Can you prove it? Can you show some evidence? They squirm away. So that's when you know that they're not using logic. They're just believing what they heard from someone else.
Right.
Or what feels good to them. And so again, this is a philosophical conversation, but from a Buddhist perspective, the more of that you can clear away, the more you're going to be happy and free and helpful. So like I said, there's two ways of knowing, like two authentic ways of knowing. One is direct through the five senses, and then the other one is using logic. And that's, I guess I'll leave it there because we could talk about what that looks like.
Okay, so is there any steps or approaches that Buddhism teaches?
Yeah, so how it's done is you start off with this book, which is a book of all these debates. And, the new students might not have the answers, but you can get the whole debate and read the whole debate, how it's done. But you kind of you have to learn, you have to memorize a bunch of definitions first. And you have to learn the format, like the format of a syllogism. So, for example, a dog is an animal is a statement, right? A dog is an animal, which means that dog fits into the category of animal. So that would be a true statement. Because that's actually very modeled how our brain works. Our brain stores things into categories, right? You could talk more about this, how we hear a word and like the dendrites connect, and but that's really what that this is almost like, when you have your computer and you have you see someone with all their I do this for people, like I go on their phone and they have all these apps just all over the place, like 5 pages of apps. I make folders and I put the apps that are in the same category in the same folder. So learning to categorize things and think in terms of categories is kind of the beginning of how this starts.
Right. So you loaned me this book,
Right.
very simple little book. Not the well, you loaned me the big one too, but I started with the little one. And what I found was interesting is that book really did a good job of taking debate and analyzing it, took an analytical approach and broke it down. So this syllogism, there's three parts to it. So every debate starts with the subject, what are we talking about? The assertion, what you're trying to prove, and then the reason, why do you think your assertion is true?
Right.
So it's really interesting because I realize I'm teaching this to some other people, and I'm realizing that I kind of do this already. When someone talks for 10 minutes, let's say, and I sit there and listen, and when they're done, I'm saying, so are we talking about your boyfriend? Or are we talking about school? What's the topic here? And they might go, yeah, we're talking about my boyfriend. Okay. So I'm trying to think, what's your assertion? So what you're saying is you don't think your boyfriend appreciates you? Is that your assertion? No. And if they start not wanting to land on an assertion, I know I shouldn't even spend time with this person. Like, we're done.
Right.
Like, if you can't take this 10 minutes of just talking and get down to what was the point? What were you trying to prove? And then if they can say what they're trying to prove, yeah, he's not paying attention to me. Now, what is your reason why? What specifically is your reason why? So I realize not only do I do those three when I make an argument, but I find myself doing that for people when they share with me. I help them put together their, syllogism basically and get down to those three things. So do you have any comments about that before I go to
No,
the
no, that was
test?
so well said. No, absolutely. That's what you're supposed to do. Like, you could ask a person, nowadays you see all these debates. It's like, it would be so helpful if we call it strong manning. It's like strong man my argument. Cause like someone's attacking, like imagine the presidential elections, they would clearly present that they understand the other person's position, but that's never what it is. It's just name calling.
Right. But this is important because when somebody is trying to confront somebody else, or somebody's at work and they're trying to make a point like they want to get a raise, or someone's preaching a sermon, they'll come to me with all of this stuff and I will do this. I didn't know I was doing this
Right.
until you gave me this book. And then I'm like, this is all I've been doing for
Well, it
people
makes
is
sense because the Buddhist masters who came up with this, they use logic to arrive at the best way to do this, and so did you. You use the same logic. It was just a matter of what would be the best way to do it. So that's the thing about all the Buddhist stuff. It's there to be found. It's not any kind of mystical thing that only certain people have revelation to have access to.
right. Well, they have it actually structured, which is even better than it's just not mystical. The thing is I think a lot of people out there are afraid of this word argument or
Mm-hmm.
debate, but yet they're like, oh, yeah, I'm really not good of explaining to someone
Exactly.
this thing because I get so confused. I don't have my thoughts organized. And this is a lot of what I do for people. A lot of times I might find out what their assertion is, and it's nothing they even said. They'll talk for 5 minutes and I'll go, sounds to me like what you're really trying to say is this. And I get the wide-eyed response. That's it. Well, they never said that, but that's kind of what I'm doing. So now the tests, I thought this was really fascinating because they have three tests
Mm-hmm.
in here. So somebody makes this assertion. Now this is the test you do back. And so the test, first of all, is does the subject and the reason, are they related? So what are we talking about? Your boyfriend. And what's the reason? I like this new TV show. It's funny. It's not the assertion and the subject have to match because they can seem far apart, but the subject and the reason have to match. They have to be about the same topic. If they're not, throw it out. And in that book, a lot
So
of times they fix that by flipping the assertion and the
right.
subject, which I thought
Well, well,
was
well,
really interesting.
well, the reason has to be a property of the subject.
Right.
So Molly is an animal because she's a dog, right?
Right.
So
So
Molly is
is
a dog.
Molly a dog? That
Yeah.
matches.
Yes.
Whereas Molly being an animal, you can't immediately go, that doesn't make any sense. I was like, no, that's kind of where I'm taking you on this journey and we're going to end at my assertion.
Mm-hmm.
So the first step is really the reason is how you get into the argument. So I thought that was really, that put words to my feelings on when I try to explain it to other people. The second one I think is my favorite is if the reason, then the assertion. If the reason is true, then the assertion must always be true. In the first example in the book, they give this, the subject is basically money, and the assertion is I'm going to have money, and the reason is because I work hard. So the thought is, okay, if I work hard, it always results in money, right? Now you're looking for a contradiction. Well, if I volunteer, I'll work hard, but it doesn't result in money. So that's the contradiction. And then the last one is if the assertion is false, then the reason is false, which I call contrastive. It's let's do the other thing because it's basically your reason has to immediately result in your assertion and nothing more. You know, it all the non-reasons have to be the non-assertion and all the actual reasons have to be the actual assertion. So that's kind of the process that people are going through. And I'm actually teaching somebody how to be a referee
Mm.
for these debates because he wants to help people improve their logic.
Yeah.
And his perspective is faith is a belief in something you can't see, either because it hasn't happened yet or because it's invisible, which you talked about as inference. So if you think about it, his perspective is improving my ability to argue improves my belief inference base, which would improve my faith. So he's looking at argument as a way to even improve your faith. So
Yeah. No.
that's so
Exactly. I
I'm
mean,
teaching him how to measure that. Yeah.
yeah. No. Because again, when you eliminate, as Sherlock Holmes says, when you eliminate the impossible, whatever is left over, no matter how improbable, must be the truth.
Right.
So,
That's
so,
contrastive.
so,
Yeah.
so like, if you really have faith, you would be willing to question your faith. You would
Right.
question your beliefs, you
Right.
know, and if it's still there after you tested it, then you know, like the Buddha says, actually, is test my words like a goldsmith tests gold
Which is
by
by fire.
by fire, by cutting, and by rubbing. And
Wow.
and each
I
one
love it.
represents, one of them says it contradicts. So the first part, like the burning, represents, does this contradict direct perception? So if someone's saying the sky is purple or the sky is yellow, so that's so the Buddha says, if I say anything that contradicts your direct perception, then don't listen to it. Number two, cutting it says, does this violate logical consistency? So
Nice.
can you defeat anything I say with logic? Then throw it out. And then the third one is basically, does it this the third, the tricky thing is, there are things that only Buddhas can see. So, but it's not faith. The Buddha's like, focus on on like the logic part. Then I'm going to tell you about these things called karma that you can't see right away, but I'll give you a lot of
Oh,
experiments you can do.
so rubbing is like is if you have a deeper perception,
Rubbing is
you'd see it.
rubbing is like, there are these authoritative scriptures. Like first of all, there's what the Buddha taught, which is a ton of stuff. Some of it was lost, some of it was preserved in China, a lot of it was preserved in Tibet, some in the original Sanskrit. So anything that I spoke is considered authoritative, and then there'll be some people who are the Sangha over the generations who will be considered the authentic teachers. So even though so if it contradicts, if you see someone making a statement and it contradicts what what's in the Buddhist sutras, then you should be more suspicious of it.
So I would say I love the rubbing thing. It is whether it contradicts basically some people would say a deeper truth. I would say a doctrine or a truth. So
Right.
so let me take all of this towards the mind and brain for a second on how most people argue and jump in at any time on this. So the way most people argue is they try to upset the other person. They try to trigger them. They try to say things that make the person mad. And because basically is we're arguing with our conscious brain and we need as much of it available as possible. But if someone gets triggered, the amygdala hijack the brain and now you can't think well. So you see this with guys, especially when guys hang out and they start arguing about something, they all of a sudden will go, okay, I'm not as smart as this person, but if I trigger them, they'll work on less brain than what I have, and then I'm going to beat them. So the idea is you go at the person and you trigger them, you bully them.
So true, so true. And that's why, in the Gelug tradition, they spend minimum 4 hours a day debating, and they get very heated, and they're even allowed to call each other names, because the whole idea is it's all about getting not triggered.
Okay, so that's their strategy, is basically trigger each other until it no longer triggers you.
Exactly. And then when and it works really well, because when you see the monks doing it, they're laughing, they're having the time of their life. It's incredibly exhilarating. It makes your mind single pointed, because a lot of the other Buddhist lineages, like I said, there's 4 lineages in Tibetan Buddhism. The Gelug are known for their debating, and the other lineages make fun of them, like, you guys are spending so much time debating, you should be meditating more. They have that reputation. But what the other people don't understand is that by doing the debating, it puts you in a meditative state.
Right. Right. Because you have to be focused on one thing. You're not going to get distracted by the name calling and everything else. Again, that'll build your self-esteem. I talk about improv, and the first rule of improv is yes and that's supposed to take the amygdala out of the picture, is whenever you agree to whatever saying and then say, now I'm going to build on it, you're staying creative, versus when you say no, now you get defensive, now you're amygdala. So that the laughing is part of it. That's what I'll say about that is, and people say about me, is if we're debating, all of a sudden I start laughing, that's a bad sign, because I'm basically going, okay, you just took a shot. And see, I have these communication guidelines, and basically they are share on yourself. So qualify everything. I believe, I don't, if I'm going to make an assertion, I got to make sure it's absolutely the truth, or my unconscious is going to knock me down. So I'll share on myself. I'll ask questions of others, and we'll talk about more about that a little later here. And then I'll answer other people's questions. Bullying is doing the opposite of those 3. Bullying is making a statement on somebody. You never go anywhere. You don't ask questions and you don't answer questions. When people don't ask questions, I know they're insecure, because they won't. It's amazing how many people, well, I'll give them an opportunity to ask a question. I'll say, don't you want to know why this happens? Or don't you want to know what my definition of this is? And it's like, wow, you just proved to me you're a bully and you're really insecure, because you're going to stick to doing the opposite of these 3. So that's one of the things I teach, preteens and teenagers, is when they're dealing with bullies, because bullying is an arguing process too. The way to defend yourself is to recognize that bully right away, and it keeps you conscious. If you have these 3 measures and you're doing that, you're keeping your conscious brain.
So cool, man. Like, You got you
Triggering is trying to lose your conscious brain.
you just have so many tools. Like it's like we got to just put these all together. But I love, bullying is like the big thing like you hear about for kids. I mean, you have the solution. Well, we have the solution for bullying is teaching people how to debate. You're 100% right.
Right.
I never thought of it like that. That the bullying is a type of arguing. You're so right.
Right.
I mean, and I've learned even as a young age, yeah, how to get away from bullies through using logic. And they kind of just realized they didn't want to bother with me because of
Right.
that.
And that's how you build your self-esteem versus suffering under a bully, but you don't have it. Now, a big
Fascinating.
thing that I do is I like to mediate arguments. And I get called in on social media a lot of times to mediate these arguments because they get really bad. And one of the things I've taught for almost 20 years is understanding versus agreement. A lot of times when I get into a situation where two people are going at each other, I'll ask the question, is our goal right now understanding or agreement? And it wakes people up because a lot of times our goal is agreement.
Mhm.
I have to get you to agree with me. You're trying to get me to agree with you. Agreement is not in our control. I am not in control of you agreeing with me. I'm not. The other thing is agreement won't happen without understanding. And understanding is in our control. So that's the point I say to people is let's first focus on understanding.
Mhm.
Let's make sure that we're both understood. So, and this goes back to the syllogism. What are you saying and why are you saying it? And then I turn to the second person. Can you repeat back to them what they said and why to their satisfaction? If they repeat back and the person says no, say it again and they say it. And again, they're saying this in front of their unconscious brain. Then the other person states what they believe and why. This was literally the argument you and I had. And what we both did without even being conscious of it is you had a what and a why. I basically stated stuff to you that made you believe I understood your what and why. I stated my what and why. You said things to me that made me believe you had heard my what and why. And then what you did, which was genius, is you took my two reasons and claimed them for yours. So you basically said, well, John, you wrote this book and you made this point in it, which you claimed as your point. And then you said, I like to put things together. I'm a synthesis person, which is what I say. And that's why I go, okay, like I knew you'd won the argument. I I I understood that. I didn't need to say I don't agree with that, or I didn't need to say any of that. We both heard and understood each other. I was really impressed with what you did, and we moved on, and you moved on. And it's just funny because that's kind of within both of us. I think we both really are focused on understanding, which is really a truth. We both want to understand what the other person's saying is why. Both want to make sure they know we heard their what and why. Then we want to say our what and why. We want to make sure they hear it. I've watched you deal with somebody who's real difficult, and that was the frustration: is that this other person couldn't repeat your what and why back to you, even though you could repeat their what and why. And then they kind of did the thing I said earlier with the syllogism: is they kind of, well, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, then you're not saying anything. If you can't tell me what you're saying and why, then you're not saying anything.
Brilliant.
So do you have any comments about that before I go to my final point, basically?
No, I'm just like I want to put your whole method down, and then the Buddhist method down, and put them together. Like,
Well, yeah, the thing is I think you already do my method. You didn't know it, but there's things you have from this Buddhism, and it's so, like I say, analytical. It's organized, and I'm learning from reading this. So it would definitely make you the guy to put this whole thing together. So the last thing I want to talk about is I say it's my technique, and I share my technique with people, and I want to get the reaction that I get from people. So basically, what I do is I say, I argue through three questions. I just think the key is to always ask questions. So I first, whenever anybody makes their point, I say, well, what's your definition of, and I pick the key word. In everybody's argument, there is a key word that their argument is based on. What's your definition of animal? And you said the Buddhists already knew this. They get all these definitions ahead of time they agree with. So you're way ahead of me on that. But I have found that asking somebody a definition, their definition of a word they use, 90% of people never answer me. 90% of people are out of the argument at that point. But that's the key, is to really understand what they're saying and not assume I know what they're saying. If I suddenly argue, they could go, well, I meant this by what I was saying. So that's my first thought, is to always do that. You sent me a video of a guy who argues, and that's what he does, is he basically asks the other person questions and gets the other person to talk first, which, again, I want to tell a quick story, because this is another method I know about arguing. I've known this for a long time. Again, I've watched my dad argue with his buddy. My dad and his mom, my grandma, used to argue. We used to go and watch. I would go over there, and my parents and my grandparents would play pinochle. And then when the game was over, they cleared everything. My dad and my grandma would argue about something. Love, the mind, the soul, whatever. And they were both masters at arguing. And I'd sit there next to my grandfather, and one of them would make a point. We'd look at each other and go, yep. And then the other one would make a point, and we'd go, wait a minute. And so I learned this at a really young age. I was very fascinated by this. And one of the things I learned is to always go second. And the story I like to tell about this is, I was the number 2 person in a company. The number 1 person was the owner of the company. And he, like all people, I feel, think that going first in the argument's always the right thing. They want to bully you. They want to make their point. They want you to go, yeah, and they want to be done with it. And he came into my office, and he was really heated about a person, and he really wanted me to believe the same thing about that. And so he's making his point. And again, I asked him, so to confirm him, I heard him. So what you're saying is this, and why you're saying it is this. And he's like, yeah. And what's funny is, in trying to understand someone, most people think you're agreeing with them, and they get excited, and they give in. And so the thing is that when I understood him, I said to him in that moment, I said, so, there's 2 sides to this debate, and I know your side. So who's the only person in this argument right now who knows both sides? And he just, well, you. I said, yeah, in fact, some of the points I was going to make, you've kind of proven them wrong. So I'm not going to make those points anymore. And in fact, what I'm doing now is I'm changing my argument based on what you said to much better points I didn't know existed. And so now that's why those are the things I'm going to argue right now. I don't know why anyone would go first in an argument. And that's the unconscious confrontation. He never went first after that moment. For as long as I worked in that company, he never went first. He learned that there. So that's one of the things is part of my technique is somebody's going online and saying something. So it's like, okay, you went first. What's the definition of this word? Now, application, you talked about the if then. Okay, if that's your definition, then how would it apply to this other thing? And now they got to give an application. If that contradicts what they're saying, then I can bring up the contradiction in my third step. I can ask a question about the contradiction. If it doesn't contradict, it actually makes sense. I can agree. They never knew I was arguing with them. They never knew I was disagreeing. So the thing is that I'm going to ask about that contradiction. Now, what I've noticed is there are people, I would say, like yourself. I know another server teacher who's another brilliant guy. I have a friend who's a server, and I actually run a book club. And this topic came up last week. Another server teacher was explaining how he's arguing with a relative, and this guy won't change his behavior. And that's when I got to explain to him, what's the reason why you're arguing? Are you arguing to be proven right, to be conscious, or are you arguing to change their behavior? Because if your job is to be right, this is completely a conscious brain argument. And the minute you see the contradiction in that third step, you're going to state the contradiction. That's a conscious brain event. They will consciously hear it, but it will not change their unconscious. And what I realized from talking with you, Jason, is that I do two more steps. So I don't ever do that third step of here's the contradiction and here's where you're logically wrong. My next step is I go, what's the principle behind their contradiction? It could be they're not paying attention, they don't finish their projects, whatever it is. Where in this person's life have they violated that principle? So I have to kind of know the person. And then the last step is I ask them about that, which is unconscious to the argument. So I will sit there and say, so was it completing a project when you didn't, finish this thing I asked you to do? So what I do is I step outside the argument. We're arguing about this topic, and I don't care if I lose the argument on this topic. I'm going to step outside the argument and ask a question, and it's going to change their behavior. They could walk away feeling, well, I was right about the argument. He didn't say anything about this. But now I've dealt with their unconscious. And when I say that, people get all upset. But if anybody's read the Bible, this is how God argues. God had an argument with Moses, and Moses got his way. He had an argument with Hezekiah. Hezekiah got his way. God doesn't care about losing the argument because he doesn't care about losing the battle. He's going to win the war. And that's what I do. I don't care if somebody wins the argument in the moment online. Tomorrow morning, they're going to wake up and their unconscious is just going to hammer them. And that's the victory I'm looking for.
It's awesome. It's like an extra, like more personal step. Whereas what we're trying to do in Buddhism is simply just get, to the clearest, clear away all of the inconsistencies where you're, again, appropriate to this Eastern Western thing. That's like kind of the Western approach is we're going to, it's a relationship. It's more personal. So yeah, that's amazing.
Right. So the thing is that I feel like Buddhism has analyzed this argument to help refine and sharpen your brain, which is great. And I think they do that. But from Geshe-la and from you, I've also seen you guys look to these bigger issues and to try to help people along. And I've there's been so many times you and I have talked and I've just gone unconscious confrontation, like just to let you know you're doing what I do. You may not realize it. So if you were to take all of this together, what is it? What's your goal with arguing? Where do you want to take this?
I mean, yeah, like we're talking about, I want to create a a platform, like learning how to even start, how to, putting it together and kind of teaching the basics, how to form a syllogism, consequence, logical fallacies. We didn't talk about that, but I love this from Western debating philosophy. So, for example, when someone says like, oh, you need to eat a lot more protein, everybody knows that. That's called appeal to the masses. Everybody knows that. That's not logic. Or, like, oh, I heard this, this expert said that. That's called appeal to authority. So has nothing to do with the logic. I want you to prove it to me. I want you to show me evidence. Just saying everybody does it, or we've always done it that way, that's called appeal to antiquity. So this to me is, like, I want people to eat healthy and live a healthy life. I want people to live their bliss, but until you are able to, have at least some ability to debate. And again, when I say debate, I really mean debate with yourself. It's really,
Right.
this is a personal thing. Everything external is just practice for the real debate inside, and how to just, it's like you could go on Facebook. Everyone's like, well, everybody's different. It's like, we can track where you got this information from. You were on Facebook, you read this person says, if you want to be healthy, you need to eat this thing. So you didn't bother figuring out why. So now that information is affecting your behavior. Now it's become a habit. Now it's affecting your lifestyle. Now it's affecting your health. And your health is affecting people around you. So the idea is that theoretically, if you took in some wrong information and you're applying that, someone can come along with better information, which, if their information, it's not that they're better and they're special because they have the better information than you. It's just like there is a way your body works. And again, it's not just with food, it's with everything. This is with anything. They're
Right.
giving you some new information that, if it's true, then you would erase the idea that you're holding, and then you would apply it and you'll get better results.
So I mentioned Power versus Force before,
Yeah.
this book right here, and I think what you just hit on is huge. In that book, you hold up, like, they would give people really heavy books to hold up and say their name, and when they said their name, their arms stayed the same. When they said somebody else's name, their
Mm-hmm.
arms dropped down. And one of the points in there to what you just said was that when we state things that aren't true as if they are true, the body feels weakness. The unconscious brain in the body feels weakness and even illness.
Mm-hmm.
Versus when we're stating truth, the body has strength or repair.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm hearing you say, though, and I hadn't thought about, was really um, a way of teaching people how to debate within themselves so that they're able to sort out the truth and remove what is in the truth, which would affect them holistically. It's not
Well,
just mentally,
right.
it's also
I
physically.
see what you're saying. Yeah. And in theory, like debate, if you do it right, it will work regardless of your somaticness, because we're trying to use logic.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, so it's like, if someone says, like, you have to eat this to be healthy, and you ask why, they have to come up with a reason, and if it's and like saying, well, I started eating it and I feel better, that is a reason, but it's a little evidence, but then there's, like, scientific studies. Like, you could look at studies where, they studied 100,000 people and they watched them over 50 years. It's not going to be a perfect study, but that's going to give you some very deep insight. So it's a
Right.
type of study done.
The thing is, though, is that our unconscious, there's the placebo effect.
Right.
So if people think something's healthy,
Mm-hmm.
the brain can help them get the effects of that.
Right.
And so that's where it's like the most powerful thing would be to have the truth and to understand
Yes.
it and be
Yes.
convinced of it, because then your body could really get behind it. So,
Exactly.
wow, this is I like what you're saying here.
Yeah, because like I
Is
said, when I tell people, like, this food is high in fiber, and fiber has, we could measure that. Like, you eat fiber, and then you could look in the gut and you see these bacteria eating it and multiplying, and we could track. So that's why I do like biology, because you can see it. But again, it's still like you always have to keep an open mind, because like the body is very mysterious. But yeah, what was I saying? Like it's like, and if I could make a recommendation, people are like, yeah, I would say read this, or let me explain this for 5 minutes. And they say, no, 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 I trust you. I'm like, I don't want you to trust me. I want you to
It's
understand.
not helping you. You know what I
Exactly.
mean? You, not you, Jason, but you could be saying to them, this isn't helping you to
Right.
just say I believe it. I
Right.
want your unconscious brain to kick in
I want,
and
so I
facilitate
want
this.
you, before you take any of my food recommendations, I want you to understand why I'm
Hmm.
recommending it and why it fits into so not just when you eat fiber, it feeds your microbiome. What does the microbiome do? Oh, it's part of this whole
Right.
system. So at least you understand like what you call the why and the how, or I call it the why of the why. It's like, and again, let's maybe end on this. Like, one of my tests to see how well someone knows something is they say something. Oh, you need to eat protein. Why? Oh, because protein is anabolic. You need it to build up things. Why is it anabolic? What, like, so how many levels, so someone can know the answer to that? I'm not going to claim to know. It's like, but and then they give you a why, and then how many whys you can get them to answer. That's how knowledgeable someone is. And most people don't even have the first why. But
I completely agree, and
and
I
that's
could
why
see why.
we went into that when we had that list on the previous episode with the four
Yep,
my
yep.
so people on the third level, they could be like, oh, we got to eat meat because of this and this, and that is true
In that
in
context,
that context. But then when you look at the bigger context, there's a deeper truth that supersedes that truth. And yeah,
that's
so
always true or always applies. I can see why your food program is holistic. It's affecting the person completely, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically. But everybody just wants this physical part, and they just want, give me the what,
mhm.
don't want to hear the rest of it. And you're basically feeling that you're enabling these people and actually hurting these people if you just give them the what without giving them the
Yeah,
whole
because
benefit. So
when you have the wisdom, the understanding, then when you go to work and your coworker says that's the wrong way to eat, and you're like, no, it's not. Then the second person says, oh no, and then you start scratching your head like maybe I was wrong. And why put yourself through that? You could
right.
know once and for all, and and those people criticizing you, you could ask them, well, how do you prove it? Can you show me why? And they won't know. They'll be like, oh, because this guy said it. Who cares what that guy said? Why?
So this is perfect because again, the reason why we're doing this topic here in season 2 is in season 3 when we start on your model, we want to reference the value of arguing and not go through all of this.
Right.
People can come back to this episode. So this was wonderful because we just really scratched the surface on
Oh,
all the
I know.
benefits of arguing and how it
Right.
helps, self-esteem, sharpen your mind, all these other, and how it's happening a lot more than people realize. So thank you. This was
Yeah,
a
and
great episode. And
ultimately, like benefit wise, from a Buddhist perspective, it's like learning this. We call it like prajna is this mental ability of discernment, and we call prajna paramita, the perfection of this discernment is the mother of all Buddhas, because not that she's literally a mother, it's that when you master discernment, basically eliminating all of the projections of your mind, all the stories of your mind, when you're able to clear that all away and just be, right? You could sit there and meditate for years. If you don't know how to discern,
right.
you're going to be, you might be peaceful, but when you perfect wisdom, you become a Buddha. This wisdom, this perfection of discernment is what gives birth to your Buddhahood, to you being completely free of all defilements and unlocking all of your spiritual, physical, emotional, all your powers become unlocked when you master this discernment. So it does have huge, but it'll also help you not be taken advantage of on the most mundane level to the most highest existential level. This is
Perfect. Thank you, man. This was great. Can't wait to meet again.
Absolutely, John. See you soon.